Well, let's continue with a presentation about Article 32 of GDPR. Very interesting article because about information security measures, and this article is very general, but at the same time not. Intars Garbovskis, I'm sorry.
Hello, as mentioned, my name is Intars Garbovskis and I'm leading security practice in Accenture Latvia. As already highlighted, today's topic is around Article 32, but to be more specific, basically describe or propose one of the ways how to, let's say, become compliant specifically with Article 32. About the agenda for this session in next 20-25 minutes, I'll try to very quickly look once again what's behind that Article 32, but I'm sure that most of you have seen and are more or less aware what's inside the article. Then I'll try a little bit go deeper what are the options to become compliant, and spend a bit more time on one specific solution or certification mechanism. And at the end, just conclusions and key takeaways. Okay, let's start with first point. Again, I will put on a screen what exactly the article means and says. That's as from the regulation. Will not read all it through, but of course I want to highlight that there are a lot of things that still allows for interpretation and gives companies and organizations their own, define their own way, opinion, how they understand and what they understand with, let's say, appropriate to the risk or measures that are appropriate. So again, definition of that word is not so straightforward, so what I want to say, there are a lot of space for interpretation as well. So these are the things then which article highlights to be implemented among other things. So starting from pseudonymization, encryption, ongoing confidentiality, integrity, availability, and resilience. Then, of course, make sure that this is that continuity is maintained, making sure we can recover, restore the availability of information, access to this information, and then, of course, regular testing, assessing, making sure that the measures implemented are really effective. So that's as it is in the regulation. One thing I wanted to highlight is about the, okay, it's not actually showing as I wanted to do it, but including inter alia as appropriate. Basically in Latvian, you can see how it's translated, and for me, to be honest, it's not very clear what exactly this statement means. This just once again kind of reassures that there is a lot of space for interpretation. So, of course, those principles are defined, but at the end, it really relies on the organizations and companies how this compliance and technical and organizational measures are implemented in the company and organization. Yeah, here, unfortunately, at least by now, we cannot certify compliance with GDPR as such. At least so far, there is no such certification. But of course, we can let's say, we can certify compliance with specific requirements. Like, for example, we have Article 32, and there is also specifically mentioned in the regulation that companies, organizations may use some of the mechanisms, certification mechanisms, to prove and demonstrate that we are working in compliance with requirements listed in Article 32. So we cannot, again, certify compliance against GDPR, but we can really showcase that this article is covered and we are doing well to meet the compliance requirements. Again, then moving forward to some of the examples or options that could be used to reach this compliance with Article 32. So again, here is reference to ENISA, let's say, recommendations on European data protection certification, dated back last November. And there is a document that really analyzes and gives, let's say, examples selected by ENISA which can be used to showcase, to demonstrate compliance with Article 32. And there is one more, actually ISO 27001, which I will look at a bit deeper, just to show how it relates to this article and if at all it sounds reasonable to implement and become compliant. So the idea is I just put in one side the GDPR requirements from Article 32, and on the other side, let's say, reference which shows that there is really the same topic covered also in this standard. So, for example, when we talk about the article itself, technical and organizational measures, then ISO 27001 actually is all about that. So implementing, establishing, implementing, maintaining information security management system. So, which includes both technical and organizational measures. Another point, again, article talks about security appropriate to the risk, which shows that really regulation allows risk-based approach. We really assess where are those highest risks, and there we actually invest and take care about those things. And from a standard perspective, again, it is definitely risk-based standard, which also suggests and basically requires first the risk assessment to identify the critical areas, most important things, and then actually apply controls specifically to those areas. Moving forward, encryption, of course, this is one big part of the standard as well. Separate section which describes cryptography controls. So getting compliant with this requirement of the article, specifically on encryption, also not a problem if you take into account standard requirements. Next point, confidentiality, integrity, availability. That's, I think, the most, let's say, exact thing that is in both regulation and in standard. Standard definitely is based on those three pillars: confidentiality, integrity, availability. So again, from regulation and Article 32 point of view, it's 100% possible to be compliant if we implement the standard. Last 2 points that are compared: restore availability, which basically means redundancy or business continuity, disaster recovery aspects, and this is also definitely covered by the standard as well. So another tick mark that we can comply with the requirement by implementing standard. And last one, but not least, again, regulation talks about making sure it's regularly tested, assessed. Basically, effectiveness of the implemented controls and measures is really critical. And again, from ISO 27001 point of view, this is one of the really important parts that standard requires. Once you implement, it doesn't end there. Basically, the journey just starts. You need to maintain, make sure that it's really effectively implemented and working. So that is one of the areas, if we look at the standard itself, comparing to the previous version of ISO standard 2005 and 2013, this evaluation of the effectiveness was one of the changes that actually was more emphasized in the new standard, making sure system is really working as it should work. Yeah, so this is just to summarize. The reason of this slide was to really show that there is link between those two things, GDPR and ISO 27001. As in the previous slide you saw, ISO 27001 is not the only standard that could be, let's say, used to demonstrate compliance, but this is the one that we also in our company are using, both to get compliance with this article within the company, and also we are doing and helping clients to implement that standard to make sure this article is covered. Again, as you noted in the title, and as I mentioned, we are speaking here only about Article 32, but the good thing is that with implementing this standard, we are covering even more. It's not only about Article 32. To be honest, this is again based on our experience and our internal mappings that we have done ISO against GDPR requirements. So we see that requirements in standard and in regulation overlaps a lot. So basically, we can cover almost all actually articles which are really speaking about specific requirements. As you know, there are a lot of things that are really not applicable to the companies or organizations which talk about really how countries should act, and a lot of things that are not related to companies, but those articles which really talk about specific requirements we can cover with ISO 27001 standard. Yeah, and then again, just a couple of things to highlight and not go maybe into too much details. The recommendations would be really not starting from the scratch. If it's not already, let's say, implemented, then the suggestion is really do it based on the already existing security management systems that are either implemented or at some level implemented in the company, and there is really no need to reinvent wheel, but simply add those things which are probably missing. But again, if we are in the process of implementing or certifying our internal security management system against any of those previously mentioned standards, that means that we will be compliant with most of the articles, actually. Of course, there are specific things that should be taken care from GDPR requirements, but in general, the standard covers all the areas. One thing that we have noticed, so many clients really take it as another formal compliance thing and try to check boxes to make sure we have done minimum to be compliant, just in case someone comes or asks us to provide some information. But our view is actually that this is good opportunity to improve information security and privacy practices in general in the company. And this is also a good opportunity to really move to the next step and try to improve also internal security culture in the company. What we have seen specifically in Accenture, as we are also ISO 27001 certified, it really helps to start doing those small things but routine things when it comes to information security, and we see that also security incidents are decreasing. Looking back, few years back to the time when we have completely implemented the standard, it's really visible that security incidents are decreasing. So, and the key aspect why they are decreasing is really awareness of the employees the messages that are delivered to them, tests that are done in social engineering area. This is the key input which helps us actually to decrease the security incidents. So again, just to re-emphasize, the message is using GDPR requirements as something that could even more, let's say, make your internal security management system stronger. And last point from my side, but of course not least, is we see that this is really one of the great opportunities to get competitive advantage in the market. So instead of looking at it just formally or just from compliance point of view, it is really a great opportunity to take it as an advantage, really showing to our customers, to our employees, that we are taking care about data, we are taking it seriously, and actually going out to the market and to any other partners, really highlighting what we have done, why we have done, which might be a differentiator comparing to other companies which are doing that only to make it formally compliant. And then as I mentioned, then ISO 27001 is one of the standards, not the only one, of course, which might be used as this mechanism as allowed by the regulation as well, which can be used to demonstrate that compliance. So that's shortly about that. Any questions, comments, I would be happy to take.
So, yes.
Hello. You mentioned small routine security management. What were those sorts of things?
One good example might be, for example, regular access reviews, which are in many cases pain for people who are not, for whom this is not a kind of daily activity. But this is something that really helps to improve the security. But without that standard, nobody probably would ask those people to do that. But this is one of the examples which actually gives great benefit. Another one, what we are doing, really regular and well-defined social engineering tests, sending emails, fake emails to employees. Then for those who fail, coming back, explaining that they have failed and they should do this and that, really tracking the results, seeing the trend. Then, of course, trainings, that's very important, which is required by the standard and by any, let's say, security management systems. Again, regular trainings to all people, new joiners, those who are already in the company. Basically, there should be processes that make sure people cannot skip those, and these I would call, again, let's say, regular things that are done on continuous basis. And of course, I will not probably speak here about all those technical things, starting from patching, security scanning, which is happening also on specific intervals regularly. But from more organizational point of view, that these could be the examples I can mention.
Any questions? No. Maybe I will ask a question. When you audit, maybe also, yes. What is your suggestions concerning Article 32? What is in practice? It's ISO 27001, or what? How you measure this compliance? Maybe more detailed.
Basically, in best scenario, it is certification against the standard. So there is specific process in different stages when you go through it. That, of course, would be my recommendation. Basically, apply for first of all, have really commitment from the leadership, from the management. If the decision is made, then go for the certification. This would be the, let's say, most appropriate way how to make sure this process is implemented properly. Another option, of course, is buy the standard and start really following it. But based on experience, in many cases, it ends at some point. So if it's not formally certified, then there is big chance that at some point some things will be kind of put aside or stopped for some reason. But if you are certified, you don't have choice. Either you lose it or you continuously do it. So.
Okay. I wonder if you have any idea for what term this certification is valid for. So for example, 3 years or?
Yeah, certificate itself, it's for 3 years. So there is a recertification cycle, but it doesn't mean that for 3 years you might forget about it. At any point, each year, external company can come in again with short notice saying that we will audit how you are doing. So recertification 3 years, but audits normally happens every year.
Okay. You have a question?
Yeah, I thought that comparison actually was absolutely excellent about GDPR list and then ISO 27001. And basically, if you're about to hire a data processor, the one thing you should be looking for is them to certify that they are ISO 27001 compliant. But I was very interested in your other comment that you think that ISO 27001 goes wider than that. So I was just I just wanted, because that was new to me, so I'm kind of here to learn.
Actually, that was something that I have done also. I've been involved in that process, so we have done that internal mapping, really ISO controls, GDPR controls, and trying to find those touch points. So, and really we see that there is 0 articles almost actually which don't have at least one touch point with any of the controls. So, and we actually went even further. We did against ISO 27001 plus also PCI DSS. So, and you can do this exercise with more than those 2 standards. But I think starting with ISO 27001 is probably the easiest way, because of course there is also this 27018, which is really for public cloud processors who process personally identifiable information, which is more specific actually. But again, to cloud providers, you can combine a lot of things, but again, my suggestion is really start with ISO 27001, which gives the basic things, and you can then expand it.
In the UK, there's this thing called Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, which is like a cut-down version of ISO.
Exactly.
So,
this might be another option how to map against GDPR.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a question.
It's a sub-question from what Tony said. Most universities in the UK are not ISO 27001 certificated. We can't be, because of this concept of academic freedom. It's very difficult, and I think it's just not the UK, it's across the world that universities would find themselves difficult to compromise academic freedom and meet the requirements of ISO 27001. The only university that I know of in the UK that is working towards 20001 is Oxford Brookes. So not Oxford University, but Oxford Brookes. So we were looking at Cyber Essentials, and that's why I said, as a sub-question, I know it's going to be, it's an academic question. I don't want you to do a theory for me. Will Cyber Essentials Plus be enough to meet the requirements, do you think, of Article 32?
Again, to be very honest, I'm not very, let's say, aware about this specific standard, but again, my assumption is that most probably for the most of the things that are in the GDPR, related to specific privacy controls or information security related controls, it should cover. And no, in the regulation, it's not really mentioned which are those certification mechanisms that can be used. There is just this slide where we have ENISA recommendations, but this is not formalized. At the same point, there might be also the standard you mentioned, but of course, it should be really done properly, looking at all the requirements on one side, another side GDPR requirements, and really trying to understand if you really believe that this standard complies with specific requirements.
See, what I understand is that certain universities are looking at some sort of cyber essentials accreditation for research, to deliver on research, because of research participant data and the processing of research participant data, which can be quite sensitive. It could include biometric data as well. So would that suffice just to have it for particular departments, do you think?
I think at the moment, as it is written in the regulation, there are no link to specific, let's say, standards or security frameworks. I think definitely this can be used, and there is good grounds to justify. So it covers most of the things. We have did mapping, but of course this should be in a way that you can demonstrate that you have done the research, looking at those controls. But definitely I think there is no big difference. Is it ISO 27001 or the standard you mentioned, or maybe some of those other frameworks?
Okay, and the next thing is a request. Would you mind sharing your template, your presentation?
Definitely, I will share that, and if it's needed, I can even probably share some materials where we have tried to do those, let's say, mappings ISO against GDPR requirements. Again, it's just Excel, but definitely, just let me know. Yeah.
Thank you.